Simon Mugo. I'm the program manager for the New York City Accelerator program. Excited to welcome you all to the multifamily affordable housing breakout session. Throughout this session, we'll talk a bit about local law 97 and how it relates to affordable housing buildings. We'll get to hear from Jim, who's with Wavecrest, managing over 300 buildings, has a lot of experience working with the accelerator as well as in terms of thinking about local law 97 implications for his portfolio. So we'll get to hear his perspective and then also hear from Rosy and Morrisa, my colleagues on the accelerator who work primarily with affordable housing buildings, so they can share their expertise and experience. So with that, I'll hand it over to Morrisa to kick us off.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We're going to begin with getting a little bit of background from Jim and talk about his experience specifically with 2723 Webb Avenue in the Bronx. So you'll be able to hear from him and his experience about going through Local Law 97, implementing certain measures at his properties. And then we're going to go into some discussion questions to really talk through what the challenges are, the experience that a property manager may have, and of course, open up the floor to questions afterwards. So feel free to either jot down your questions if you have them, and save them for the end, and we'll talk through all of them. But with that, I will pass it on over to Jim to talk about 2723 Webb Ave.
Oh, okay. Well,
if you want
thanks.
to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jim Craig. I'm the Director of Energy Management for Wavecrest. We're in the city. We've got, as you see, a fairly extensive portfolio of buildings that need to comply with Local Law 97. Probably about 90% of them are low-income multifamily. So they can follow, fortunately, the prescriptive pathway of to 13 measures. So from there, I've been working with the New York Accelerator team because without them, I would not be able to take on this scope of this project. And then enrolling our property managers as to what needs to be done, give them the reporting of engineers that we've contracted to come in and do their walkthrough of each building, come up with their list of 13 measures, which are all the same, give them to the managers and set them on that path to resolve any of the ones that are incomplete, I should say. You've got items that will be completed prior to a scope of work, things that were done over the years, insulation, LEDs, things like that. We've got other measures that are going to find that are not applicable. Hydronic buildings, anything steam related is not applicable. As we got listed here, the scopes of the average 7 to 8, we haven't found a building yet that needs all 13. The most part, it is 6 or 7 measures that have to be done. And working, like I said, with New York Accelerator, filling out applications, getting them submitted for rebates and incentives is certainly something everybody can use help with. Certainly not just me, but anybody can use that help and assistance in tracking down how to use other people's money, so to speak, utilities, for instance.
We can narrow it down.
So, one of the buildings that we put in for as sort of a presentation is 2723 Webb Avenue. This one is sort of, I think, what this whole Local Law 97 program was designed for. This is a sort of moderate, 51,000 square feet, pre-war, 1925, one pipe seam. It has dual fuel, so it's primarily gas, has some oil. This, older fixtures for lighting. So this one pretty much covers it clicks every box of the 13. So we've done over the past 8 months a number of upgrades. The lighting, put in boiler controls, which I will say is probably the most important that we've found. Putting in the boiler controls. We use Runwise on this building. We have heat timers, we have NTEX, BGSs, and scattered throughout a number of the buildings. Other buildings we manage either by design, we installed them and contracted, or buildings we took in from management over the past year that already had them installed. So we've kept them in there, and so we're not overly favorable or advocating one over another. They all do the same thing. It's really the front end system we found is very user friendly. Their monitoring and support staff is phenomenal, as well as the others, but Runwise is the one we have predominantly in most of our buildings. Pipe insulation, weather stripping, kind of low hanging fruit measures that you can really get a decent amount of rebate and incentives for. We were just discussing one of them, one building, one of the last measures we have is about $18,000 in pipe insulation. Now, that's expensive for any building. So we reached out to Rosy and Morrisa, found a contractor that was approved, put in for it. That after the rebate will probably come down to, under 12, maybe $8,000, depending on the usage that the building utilizes over the years and how much it's based on the savings, right? The rebate is based on the savings that can be accumulated. So from 17,000 down to what we think will hopefully be 12 or 10, that's pretty significant. And like I said, without their background and expertise and setting us up with vendors and sourcing funding, it's been a huge help.
Right.
Yeah, I think in this slide, we're just trying to highlight, and this is maybe a recap if you were able to join the main session. We are offering free courses through our Energy Efficiency Learning Center. So the total value of the courses that we're offering is about $450. You get continuing education credits. So if you're interested, you're an architect or a service provider, or would just like to learn more about more in-depth energy performance, building performance measures, you can scan the QR code and get access to those trainings. So
yeah, we'll leave it up for a few minutes so folks have a chance to.
No, I got a question. Actually, is the training, is it just for the professional fields, or is there training for property managers and supers of buildings?
yeah, it's a good question. So we have both, and the trainings range the spectrum. So it's, trainings for very fundamentals of building science, how a boiler works, all the way through to high performance, like really in the weeds, technical information. So there's over 100 courses that you can sift through, and it does indicate sort of the level of technical difficulty of the course. So if you're a co-op board member or super or building performance specialist, there's something in between that you can access and find value.
Yeah, that is actually something we implemented about a year or so ago with trying to get all of the managers and supers either on a Zoom presentation, training, or an on-site. So if somebody comes in and we do a quick walkthrough so they understand, really fully how their buildings systems operate. And savings, how they directly relate to the savings by telling managers and supers, if a boiler is leaking, even a little, fix it.
Yeah. Operation and maintenance is as important as
Absolutely.
Energy efficiency.
Did everyone get a chance to take a screenshot of or a picture of the QR code? Awesome.
And we'll share the slides after. So if you didn't
Yeah.
get a chance, don't worry.
So that we talked a bit about 2427 Web Avenue. What I will do is keep up this QR code here. Of course, that's straight to the Accelerator website if you want to connect with an account manager directly. We're going to move into some of the discussion questions that we have, and then of course open it up to Q&A from the audience. But of course, for sure, take down this information if you want to connect with us directly. That is the best way to get in touch with an account manager so we can start talking about your buildings that you're working with. But with that, I'll pass it over to Rosy to get into discussion questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosy. I'm an account manager with the New York City Accelerator. As Simon mentioned, we very much focus on the affordable housing building demographic to make sure that they all have the guidance they need to comply with Local Law 97, but also kind of bringing some awareness to all the resources that are available to help buildings reach compliance. And in this section, I'm gonna have a conversation with Jim, very much like the conversations we've been having for the last 3 years.
But back and forth weekly with emails and phone calls.
Yeah, but with a bigger audience to kind of really detail the process that Jim has gone through in order order to get such a large portfolio through its journey of compliance when it comes to Article 321, because there is very specific nuances that are applicable to affordable housing when it comes to Local Law 97. So we're hoping this conversation can elucidate exactly what those nuances are, what have been some of Jim's approach, and how our team has tried to help him and his portfolio get to that goal of being in compliance under Local Law 97. So to start us all off, do you want to talk a little bit briefly, Jim, about what were the first steps you took to move your portfolio towards Local Law 97 compliance?
With anything, any new, I can't say this is new. This has been on the books now for a few years, but it seems to be new just the past 2 years, at least as far as I'm concerned, where I first learned about it. And that's really the first step is, what is this? What is Local Law 97? And, how is this going to ruin my life in the next few years? So that was the first process. Okay. And then from there, it's what buildings need to comply. We've got a portfolio actually of about 780 buildings. However, only 300 or so fall in the bucket here, the Local Law 97, right? Anything under 25,000 is off the table. That left us with a sample of this grouping of 300. And then it's, okay, what do I need to do, right? There are 3 buckets. It's the pathway. It's the first one is, prescriptive. And then the second is for 2026 and then 2035, which not even looking at that. So really the bulk of our buildings, the 300 or so that are prescriptive path, it's okay. Working with Rosy and, everybody I'm assuming has a Local Law 84 provider if the building's over 25,000 square feet. And that's, how do I build a team? So my first process was reach out to my 84 provider and say, all right, which buildings, where do they fall? Are they above the threshold? Are they below it? If they're above the threshold, we need to hire an engineering firm. A lot of our buildings are over 50,000 square feet, so we have relationships with Local Law 87 providers, right? As sort of once every 10 years, buildings have to do that are above 50,000 square feet. So if anybody's got buildings like that, I'm sure you do. You already had gone through possibly a Local Law 87 energy audit. Those are the engineering firms you want to reach out to. They're all doing the 97s. So first thing was understand the process, which buildings have to comply, find an engineering firm that will price you and come out and do the walkthrough to give you your report listing the 13 measures. From there, I reached out to Rosy and her team saying, what's my next step? This is all going to cost money. How can we mitigate this and leverage Con Ed, National Grid, AANEP, whatever, NYSERDA, whatever agencies are out there that are looking to throw money towards you if you can get it done. And then from there, it's turn it over to the managers. For me, just to be organized, everyone's got their own process. I took a spreadsheet in Excel and 3 tabs, prescriptive, 2026, 2035, right? 13 measures across the top. Every building needed to comply going down the left side of it. And then from there, when I got reports back from the engineering firms of the 13, and they're all the same, I just plotted each one on the spreadsheet. This is done. And now you're separating column by column. All right, who do I need to adjust? Boiler controls. Who do I need for insulation? TRVs, boiler cleanings, LEDs, and then just separate them out. There's 13 measures. I don't think you probably need more than 6 vendors. Anybody who's putting in an EMS controller can adjust your boiler controls. Anybody doing steam venting can do your TRVs and your steam traps. Anyone doing the LEDs can do your Local Law 88s. As a matter of fact, we have somebody sitting in front here who I have used for the past 10 years almost extensively on LED installations. This is Joe from Riverdale Electrical, who have to show up today, unbeknownst to me. But yeah, and that's kind of the format I put out is a spreadsheet, and then put a team around me of 4 people, of 4 entities, where, Accelerator, we rely on heavily. And then getting our managers to do, here's your list. You've got 6 things. If you did 1 a month, I get it, everybody's busy. If you did 1 a month, you'd be finished well before the year end. And this was starting back in March, April. So even now, if they're getting started in January, by May 1st, you'll have them done. And then it's just a matter of having those same engineering firms who gave you those reports come back and certify that everything's been done and submitted. And that's, it seems daunting, or it did at first. Once it starts going, I can continue to add on to this building list, which I'm probably not going to have to, all the way down the page. And it's the same, cut, paste, redo again, over and over again.
Yeah, I think something unique that you did in your process, Jim, was really trying to identify what were the missing prescriptive measures. So I'm wondering, when you had this behemoth of 300 buildings that were basically all going to do the prescriptive measures. I know there's a 2030 pathway for buildings, but for a lot of folks, that is cost prohibitive because it demands some really intense retrofits in order to get the building under their 2030 limit. So once you really kind of honed in on the prescriptive measures, what were your next steps to try to identify those missing measures in all those buildings? I know you really came at it with a very unique
Well, you're
strategy.
working off the report, right? So you get
Yeah.
the report back and, however many other pages are on it, they're all gonna have that one page from your engineering firm listing the 13. 3 of the items were done. 3 of the items are not applicable. If it's a hydronic, then there's 3 steam measures are not applicable. Everything else, it's okay. Here are my 5 items. How much is this going to cost? Weather stripping and insulation, again, low hanging fruit, get that done. Oil controls. The one thing that I guess that kind of made me really sort of slow play a lot of this is the DOB has been somewhat slow being clear, and then some things have changed. So things that we thought we would need to do, turns out we didn't need to do. With 1 pipe steam, that was removed. The 2 pipe steam, you need to put the barriers, you need to TRVs, you need to have a boiler control. Fan timers, as I found out on one building, which we were looking at, $200,000 worth of fan timers to be put on the roofs. Turns out, if the fan was designed to be continuously operated, don't put a timer on it, right? That was a huge change. Saved at least a couple $100,000 on this one building. So it's really a constant connecting with you. What just changed this week? Today, we're about to start the next process on this other building. Are we still required to do it? What are we required to do now? Do we have to test 20% of these? Is it only for people who, apartments that have complained of excess heating? Of which I can tell you, it's not a single building of ours people who complain about excess heating. I've seen people with 95 degrees in their apartment and they're perfectly happy. When it goes to 75, they call and say that they're freezing. I'm sure everybody's gone through that process. So it's as long as people aren't complaining it's too hot, that's a measure you don't have to, make any changes to. But yeah, it's a continuous update, staying on top of things, and it's still moving forward. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. And something changes and I have an owner saying, gee, Jim, why did I just spend 15 grand for this? And now it just changed. But you can't do too little. So and now with the mediated option, at the end of the year, if there's 1 or 2 things, we can say, hey, listen, it's contracted. We did 9 of the items that we were required to do. Maybe we have 1 or 2 left. We're planning that for next year. So there won't be any fines for that. So it's really just, just kind of staying on top, keeping the documentation and just moving, 1 step at a time. But it's really the same step repeated for every single building, no matter how many buildings you have.
So if I could just ask a clarifying question. I know you mentioned the report and some people in the audience may not be familiar with which report you're referring to.
It's, think of it as a a home inspection. Right, you're contracting an engineer, an inspector, go into the building. It's a little different than local 87s where it's a little more, not subjective on on this part, but they will find different things. For this local law 97 prescriptive path, it's 13 specific measures. And it's the same, every engineering firm is going to go in and look for. So they may wrap their report with some other data and utility usage that they've tracked and metrics in there, but really it's going to come down to the page that says, these are the 13. These 3, LED, you have LED lighting, you don't have leaks, that's good, they're complete. You don't have weather strip, you don't have insulation, those are the report you get, and that's the page you need. And you look at that and say, okay, here's my 13 tasks. If there are any, and I really would doubt any builder needs all 13. To some degree there, you've got a lot of stuff done. You'd be surprised. Pipes that are insulated already. So that's the one that I take. I send it to the manager. Go get your guy, whoever you want to use. If you don't have anybody, let us know, and we'll put you in touch with Rosy and at New York Accelerator, and they will give you somebody off of their approved list, and fill out the applications to help you get the rebates on getting the work done.
That's great. I guess another clarification point is, as you spoke, you mentioned owners. So I just want to clarify to the audience that Wavecrest manages buildings. Then
We actually, Wavecrest as an entity owns about 25 buildings, this being one of them. We manage properties for a couple of dozen other ownership groups. Some have 1 or 2 buildings, some have 15 or 20 buildings, some have 30 buildings. At least getting the owners to understand what this is. First, I had to understand what this is, and then regurgitate it to owners to get them to understand what this is and how they need to do this. I still have owners saying, yeah, we're looking into it for next year to see if we're going to budget for it. No, you have to do this. You're past that stage. This has to be done. We have other owners that are completely hands-on. They're like, yeah, we have people, we know what we're going to do. We've got contracted for whomever they're going to use. We're going to be providing the firms to go in and do the vendors to do the work afterwards. Great. I don't have to touch that building. Let me know when you're done, just for my purposes. But it's better to get the owners to understand it, because there is a cost. I would say for the most part, buildings like ours, for this typical size, you're probably looking at, $15,000. If you have 3,500 to get a company to come in and do the inspection, then there's another couple of thousand for them to certify when the work is done. It's just really that middle group of what's the cost of getting those measures done and working with, they may not give you that because they won't know. They're an engineer firm. They may not tell you, well, your insulation is going to be this, your weather stripping is going to be that. You got to go out and get your own vendors or buildings that we manage. Each manager kind of has their own go-to guy that they like to use. So they'll use that person, come in and get a proposal, and then submit it to, if they're approved, submit it to New York Accelerator and see how much of a rebate we can get back for that. But we have found, buildings this size typically is, 6,000 or 7,000 for the inspection, certification, another $6,000 or $7,000, $8,000 for actual implementation of the measures.
I think one really good point that Jim has highlighted is that a lot of people looking at the prescriptive measure list is very daunting, right? So thankfully he was able to connect with an engineering firm who came out and did a walkthrough of his buildings to give him that local 97 report, right? So that way you just have a baseline to start with. I've worked with many different buildings that did, different approaches, right? There are ways to get scopes through different programs that would, be subsidized, and thankfully free for building owners, right? There are other people who they say their supers are super knowledgeable and they walk through with the prescriptive measure list and are able to give us a rough idea of what they think needs to be done, and we connect with contractors to see if that is something that does need to be done at the property and what the cost may be like. So you can definitely approach figuring out your scope in different ways. One, of course, surefire way to do it is connect with us, and we can connect you with engineering firms to figure it out for you and give you a full report. But it's important for your first step is just figure out what needs to be done at your property.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about a program that may give you at least a starting point to understand how much needs to happen in this building. Thank you so much. But most importantly, what are the incentives that are available? I think Jim touched on this, and that is kind of one of the big benefits of affordable housing is that we have these utility programs that really do contribute to the cost share of a lot of this work. So what we want to try to do is leverage all those incentives to help the building help minimize the cost that the building has to put forward in order to do this work. And I think something that's really important that you keep mentioning, Jim, is that for the most part, most buildings don't have to implement all 13 of the prescriptive measures. We have looked at, I don't know how many, maybe thousands of buildings, and in no case have we found a building that has had to do all 13 measures. And that really helps people understand like the scope of this actual work. To Jim's point, it's more like 5 to 8 measures that folks are looking into, which is much more digestible and really helps folks understand, okay, this is how much is this going to cost, and this is how long it's going to take. But I think a question that might be helpful for folks, Jim, from your perspective, you already touched on it with the boiler controls, but with the prescriptive measures, like what are the measures that kept coming up as the missing measures in the buildings? And I know this is very much related to the systems, the heating system specifically. And if you can just touch upon from those measures, which one had the biggest bang for your buck that clearly generated savings?
Well, that's the boiler controls.
Yeah.
These steam traps, for the most of the buildings we have are hydronic. Of the 300 some odd, 90% of those, or 85 anyway, are hydronic. So the steam traps, the steam venting, is pretty much off the table for those. But regardless, the one that really is the biggest bang for your buck is a boiler control. And again, it's a Runwise and NTEC, heat timer, BGS. Obviously there's half a dozen out there. Those are pretty heavily incentivized. Well, they used to be years ago. They're still incentivized now. A couple of years ago, 8 years ago, anyways, when I got into this seat, each building, it was a good to have, right? They saved money. It was absolutely a good to have. Now they've made it almost a mandatory to have. So that pool of money has dwindled a bit, but it's still pretty well incentivized. It could be anywhere from $500 for installation or $100 for installation, and the rebate covers the rest of it. That the engineering firms, the installation firms, the Runwises of the world will take on that. So it's not like you're paying 10 grand and you're waiting to get $9,500 back. They'll take on that role. They'll put in for the rebate, and they'll $500 out of pocket, and then you've got an annual monitoring agreement where they're logging in. They can see how the building is operating. They will control, or you can set your inside desired set points, 72 in the day, 68 at night, or whatever adjustments you want to make. They will send alerts if it's above it, if it's below it, if the boiler didn't start, if you've got a leak, coils, or the temperature is not hot enough. So you can configure a lot of this to what it is you want. And their team is, as well as the other teams out there, that's what they do 24/7. They work with your supers directly. And those savings we have found anywhere from pretty much a minimum of 15% to 50, 60%. And that's starting right now. We've had oil controls put in throughout the year, last year and the year before, but now starting now, I tell these managers, do not overheat your buildings. And I already get emails constantly. Super just ran a boost, and you can see the apartment's 74 degrees, the building is 74 degrees. Each apartment is 72, 71, 75. Why are you running a boost? People are complaining it's cold. So you can see every apartment is 72 degrees. But they get used to just, if someone complains, you just flip the switch and turn it on. that's where you can start controlling that from October through November, where that savings is right on your next utility bill. You didn't spend 6,000 last month, you spent 3,800, 4,500. So that dollar you're saving right now can go to pay for the things you need to do versus your savings from LEDs and from installation of pipes. You don't see that for a couple of years. So it's the boiler controls right now that save the biggest amount of money directly.
Yeah, if I can bring everyone's attention, this is one of Jim's buildings actually, and we have a program called 3-2-1 Go that we offered through the accelerator. This is specifically for buildings that are asset managed by HPD or HDC, and it really speaks to a lot of what Jim has mentioned. An understanding of how much is the scope of work, what are the actual measures that the building is going to have to implement, but also what are the estimated operational savings, because I think that is a number that is really fruitful for buildings to understand. So that they can see that if they do this, it's not only because they're complying, but because their building is going to receive utility savings that are going to go right back to the investment they made in doing these measures. So if we look up here, we have, if you scroll up a little bit, we have 1610 St. John's. It's one of Jim's buildings. And what this software does is that it pulls from publicly available building data. So your local ID4 benchmarking, your local I-87, if the building is over 50,000 square feet. And what we're able to look at is the building affordable, giving us some idea if it falls under Article 321, as well as what kind of heating system that is. And that is crucial and super helpful for this specific work because, as Jim mentioned, the measures are very much based off of what's applicable in the building. So steam buildings have a different scope than hot water buildings. So by us being able to have this information automatically, we're able to see what are the applicable measures for the building to, again, give property managers and building owners a better idea of exactly what the scope is going to look like. If you scroll down a little bit, so here, this top section is super fruitful because what we can do with this program is identify what are the potential incentives that may be available. Jim has talked a lot about the utility programs. One of the big ones that we refer folks to is the Affordable Multifamily Energy Efficiency Program. And that is basically a program that if a building is subject to Article 321, they will be eligible for the most part, as long as they are receiving, they're in an active account with Con Ed and or National Grid. And then we have some projected construction costs, again, giving you a blueprint of what it is that the scope is going to look like. But most importantly is this item on the operational savings, because that's something that is hard for folks to identify when they look at a scope. So when they see that they could save up to $4,000 a year, if they were to implement this, it makes more financial sense to move forward with these scopes. And Jim, you mentioned the mitigation opportunities. Yeah. I think it's important to highlight that it is not too late to pursue the prescriptive measures if your building is under Article 321. As we've been saying, it's usually just a handful of measures that need to be implemented. And if you start now, or if you make a plan to start in the coming months, and you can show DOB that you have a plan and that these measures are being pursued, you will have until the end of 2025 to do this work, which is much more manageable than a month and change to get everything done. So we wanted to highlight this for folks that may not have resources to get contractors in and identify what are the missing measures, but it's all about using all the resources available, whether it's a contractor, us, data, to really try to get this work done.
Yeah, we use 6 different engineering firms for this whole process, because there was no way I could give one firm 300 buildings.
They would love that.
I live under the rule that I'll give you enough rope to hang yourself, but not enough rope to hang me with you. So there's no way I can rely on one firm to do 300 buildings. Yeah. So I split it up the way I organized it is everybody in the buildings in the Bronx, I gave to one. Manhattan, I gave to another.
Yep.
Brooklyn and Queens, I gave to a third.
Yep.
And then I had a couple of peripheral firms that I use this way. Everyone's got enough to where they can at least give me some decent pricing on it as they're getting a bulk of buildings. They'll go out and do it and send it back. There are a few others that I've been talking to as well recently that you don't have to do this on your own. They will go out, they will come back, they will do the full scope of what needs to be done. And then they will implement that. They will get the contractors. They will, so it's a turnkey for them.
Yep.
You're probably going to pay it maybe a little bit more.
Yep.
But I found that it frees up the managers and the supers to have other things to do all day long to focus. Not, they don't have to focus on this.
Yep.
And we've also had is issues where halfway through the year, a super quits or a manager leaves. All right, now what do I do? Now I've got to get, and I don't know what the person did.
Yeah.
I've said, did you keep records of this? The next manager coming in saying, I have no idea where we left off.
Yeah.
And he didn't update me, so I don't know where we are.
Yeah.
So you almost have to start all over again. So there are firms out there that will take on that role and they will price it that way. Either they're going to come in and just do it and give you the report and you do it yourself, or they will take on the role of, you've got 4 things here, we can implement all of it. They do it and they certify it for you and now you're done.
Yep.
That's a very simple way to do it. I probably should have gone a little further that route earlier on, but as a learning curve happened over the past year, this didn't come about until later on. But there are plenty of firms out there that are all doing these local law 97s. That's actually kind of almost created a cottage industry of where everyone seems to have the access to do this now, as long as they're, make sure they're licensed,
Yeah.
a qualified engineering firm that's going to do it. Yeah, and like I said, it's just every building that comes on, or we lose, we've lost buildings halfway through the year, management, they've left. But to get back to your point on the screen, this is not something they're going to give us, what the pricing is for all these things. They're an engineering firm. They can go out and get people to do it for you and handle it for you, but you're not going to know right away. So what is the return on,
Yeah.
am I going to save $8,000 on installation if I spend $8,000 on installation? How long is that going to take?
Yeah.
2 years, 3 years, 5 years? So with your model and, pulling historical data from local law 84s and 87s, you can project that. That's not something I certainly am able to do, is pull down utility data and try to figure out how much savings is going to be used
Yeah.
and project it forward. I just have to go to the owners and say, you're looking at a $6,000 cost here for installation, but you should be getting it back in a 7-year period or something
Yeah.
along those lines, depending on the winter months.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Jim. I think we're about 13 minutes before the end of our session, and we want to make sure that we have some time for questions. So happy to move forward to answering some questions. If you want to raise your hands, we're happy to take some. Gentleman right over here.
See, biggest challenge that we've been facing when it comes to local 97 is it seems like our previous administrations haven't really done this work to audit, survey, budget. And we don't have the resources to necessarily do some of the projects we'd like to. What would you recommend to people like us where we want to get this work done, or working with organizations like Accelerator, AEA, but then we run into a budgetary shortfall or people not wanting to fill out their income verifications?
Yep. I think it's definitely tricky. Our team has worked extensively with HDFCs, and we know the dynamic of a board adds some complications to it. So I think first and foremost, again, as an HDFCs, I would look at the utility programming, because that doesn't require kind of unit by unit income verification, which can really hold up the process. So those are opportunities that once we have a common area utility bill, we can get your building eligible and then start really kind of honing in on what incentives are available. So that's an easy way, and that's something that we do a ton in order to leverage any money that the building can use in order to do this work. I think separately from that, is really just understanding like what does the building need to do? So happy to connect and try to identify. We work very closely with a partner called UHAB. I don't know if you've engaged them at all, but they are a great resource for HDFCs and provide services for local on 97 with our assistance, as well as a plethora of other things that may come up for HDFC. So I would say talk to us. We're happy to really kind of navigate your situation based off of what's going on with your particular building. And we can see if you're eligible for 321 Go. If you want to put the website up, I would encourage everyone to visit the website, submit your buildings. Again, all it really takes to be eligible is being asset managed by HPD or HDC to have an easy visual aid that you can share with all the building decision makers to identify exactly how to start this process. Because again, there is still time to start the process. So happy to connect and really figure out how we can help your building.
Questions. The first one is, do we have access to that momentum data that you have there, or it's only internal usage?
So it's internal usage, but the way that the program works is that you will submit your buildings. I'm the one who's kind of filtering through all the buildings that are submitted. And if it's HPD or HDC asset managed, I'm able to verify that the building is eligible, create these scopes, and work with you in order to customize the scopes based off of what the building is looking to do in terms of like capital planning, or what measures may have already taken place in the building. So
reach out to you, that's the best way to get the data.
yes. And I would also encourage, yes, the QR code is perfect. And then we have the website too, where you can submit the buildings. It comes straight to us, and I'm able to follow up and say, you're eligible. And if you're not eligible, we try to identify some other way to get you some scopes or some information for local on 97 compliance.
And my next question was for both you and Jim. You mentioned that some of those measurements probably will be, or at least some of the work will be done in 2025. So in the beginning, when the law took effect, said everything should be done by December 31st. But we expect that, let's say, half of the work will be done in 2025, or most of it will be done on this year, 2024. How do you see that going forward? Is the penalties gonna kick right away, or they're gonna give you some grace period? Because this is something that we don't get enough answers every time we ask them.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. As I was for this, I did go sit in the theater and listen to the rep from the DOB, and she was talking exactly about that, specifically for the prescriptive measures. Like I have no expectations at all that the 300 buildings that we have will be completely all done by May 1st. I mean, it's just, it's not gonna happen.
And you're
You
not
know,
even talking December, you're talking.
Yeah, I'm talking May 1st, right? You know, because of the buildings are, you know, motivating managers. We've got 28 managers. This is not something I'm doing at all these buildings. I'm kind of quarterbacking it, so to speak, overseeing it. You know, giving these managers, you know, some work faster than others, some, you know, or better documentation than others. All the buildings we manage all have their own budgetary constraints. Some have more, some have less budgets, you know, monies to throw towards this. So yeah, the minimum thing is we can show we got these buildings contracted, we have a scope, all right? You know, that's the whole part of this prescriptive measure is if you do these 13 things, you'll never have to do something again, right? You know, versus the other buildings. So this is the bone that, so to speak, the DOB has thrown at you. If you do nothing, yeah, that's kind of a slap in the face, right? That's not going to fly. So, you know, we could say, listen, we've got them done. Half of these things have already been done and we found over the past years. We did 3 of the measures. There's 1 or 2 of them here that are, as I mentioned, there's $17,000 of insulation. We have somebody, but it's just not going to be done this year.
Yeah.
You know, that's the mediator. What she was speaking about is, you know, you come to them and say, listen, you know, this is what it is. I can't squeeze blood out of a stone here. I'm not going to get $1,000 out of a building that, you know, that doesn't have it for this thing. They just don't have it. So, but at least you can say, I got them done. I got it contracted. And I've actually done that with other buildings that were slightly below the threshold that really probably don't need to do anything. But I've said to them, you know, spend the money if you have it for $3,500, get it looked at, so at least you know what you need to do, and you may not have to do anything. Just cover your base, get that done. You know,
Yeah,
if you're above it, you're gonna have to implement. If you're not, at least you know what some of the things you should probably do. None of this is wasted money. You know, you're gonna get it back over a period of time, but, yeah, there will be plenty of buildings that it's, you know, I'm gonna have a stack that will be going through a mediated process,
Yeah.
you know, that, you know, the DOB's, you know, you would think is not in the business to issue fines. They want to try to get you to comply.
Yeah.
So, there seems to be a you know, flexibility there now, which she was speaking about.
I will mention, there's a lot of information about the mediated resolution in the Article 321 filing guide. If anyone has seen that already, if you haven't, feel free to reach out to us. We can connect you to it. There's a ton of information of what you'll need to include in your report to make sure that you will avoid those fines and DLB knows that you're working towards compliance to have that extra time until December 31st. One other really great resource is HPD. They have a ton of resources on their website for Local 97 for affordable housing. If you're looking for more information on mediated resolution specifically, they host webinars, and you'll be able to find either a recording of a past webinar or look at their schedules for future ones, specifically targeted towards mediated resolution and talking all about that extra time that you have to comply.
yeah, and to button this up, and then we can take another question. We're almost at time. Just as long as you start now, you still have time. So to Jim's point, if you have a contractor that you're in conversations with, that you're getting in contract with, if you're going through any of the incentive programs we've mentioned, and you can show those applications and those pre-intake forms, those are all documents that show that you are moving towards this process. And under the mediated resolution, there's a few things that DOB is expecting in order to get this extension of sorts through the end of 2025. So it's an attestation that the building can't comply. And then the previous year's benchmarking for that particular building, as well as a compliance plan. And this is either for buildings that started doing the prescriptive measures, haven't finished, but can show through all this documentation that I just mentioned, which is whether it's the utility programs you're leveraging or the contractors that you've engaged to do this work. All of that would be provided to DOB by May 1st of 2025. And then you can avoid those fines and get those additional months to finish the work. There's also, if your building is doing a ton of capital planning in the next couple of years, and you're looking to upgrade the boiler to the point where it can reduce your greenhouse gas emissions under your 2030 limit. 2030 by 2030 might be a good pathway where you have until 2030 in order to diminish your greenhouse gas emissions under your specific limit for the building. So there's still time, but we would definitely encourage everyone to start now rather than later. But
I'd say, the
yeah.
first thing is, if you haven't done it, your only constraint now would be the amount of time it takes, whomever you've contracted, the engineering firm, to schedule you, get you on their list. That could be a couple of weeks. They're gonna send somebody out. They're gonna walk through the building. It could be a couple of 3 more weeks after that, before they, you know, give you your, okay, here's your report. You know, and then from there, it's okay, I got 6 things to do, 5 things to do. It's, so that lead time of, you know, because everyone's now has years gone by.
Yeah.
Finally starting to understand, what do I need to do here? And now you're, you know, trying to get somebody in here, you know, how quickly you can get them in there to get them on, to get you on their list, to get you, the inspection itself, it's probably under 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know, they can knock out 2 or 3 buildings a day if
Yeah.
you can get them to come to your, however many buildings you have. And then from there, you're waiting a couple, 3 weeks for them to review and regurgitate that report and get it out to you. And then it's, you know, at least at that point, you can show the DOB, hey, I've taken the step I needed to do. You know, I didn't disregard this. I got this done. Now it's just a timeline of which they say, great, okay, let us know when you're done.
Yeah, we can take one last question. If anyone has a question.
I want to ask about the building that you were presenting. I mean, the building is ready or already in compliance, because you didn't mention a couple of things, and I would like to know how did you approach them? For example, the TRVs, the indoor sensor in apartments, the lighting sensors, and the reading barriers.
Okay, so to start off with the TRVs for hydronic buildings, you know, that's not going to be needed. For steam buildings, yeah.
This one.
Yeah, this is a one type steam. So some of those measures are not needed. As far as the TRVs, getting the steam traps and steam ventilations done, yes, contracted. That will be a little more expensive. They will take a little more time. I've told managers, knock off the easy stuff first, put that other stuff later. So as they said, I don't expect all of our buildings to be completely finished. That will probably be one of them, having steam traps cleaned and tested before, May of 2025. The steam buildings also need the barriers behind them. We've found a couple of vendors that have, 4x8 sheets of flexible, and they just give them to the building, and you just cutting the size you need, velcroing it behind it. You can knock out 3 of these in an apartment, bedroom, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, whatever, in a matter of, an hour or less. What else did you mention? Lighting?
Lighting sensors, yes.
The sensors for, again, this is for the steam buildings, you need to have, they're requiring an EMS, a boiler control in the building, of which a minimum of 25% of your units need to have a sensor. And that's not a deal. That's really just a utility thing. To get the incentive and the rebate, you need to have 25% apartments with a sensor that is all aggregated on their system, so you can see your building's average. For hydronic buildings, boilers, all you need is a minimum is an outdoor sensor, a Tecmar, some kind. That's just telling the boiler it's under 55 degrees, it's over 60 degrees. So that was a big change. So we didn't need to have controllers put in all of these buildings. A lot of the buildings we have them in, but there was 100 or so that didn't. And being that they're hot water boilers, hydronic, we don't need to have them. So that was a huge savings. So that's mentioned over the year. There's been some changes that have happened, and that was one of them. No, it's great to have. I'm still advocating buildings. We managed to put them in. Maybe we have to do them now. You're not required to now because you're a hot water building. But put it in. You should look to put it in next year because, like you said, the savings are pretty substantial and immediate.
This is a great conversation. We have a professor that's going to come in and conduct class in a few minutes, so we want to make sure to make some space for them. But thank you all so much. We're available to chat afterwards, and thank you for your time.